Right, all right. How you doing?
Getting better. Back is healing up finally.
Yeah. Yeah, good.
Rough there for a couple days,
How did
but
this happen again?
well, so I think like mm, I played pickleball 2 days in a row, and I could tell my back was just sore in general after that. And that following day, it kind of like went out. So like, but not too bad. And then I was kind of, fine for a week, still sore, but then drove down to my parents' house. And then Super Bowl Sunday, that morning, I was just like going to pick up a blanket off the couch and I felt like a pop in my lower back. And then went from being fine to immediately not being fine, like on the floor,
Oh, dude, those
just
are the
like
worst.
in so much pain. And I was house sitting for my parents, so I was there at my parents' house by myself, like with the dog and the cat, just like suffering for a few
With the
days.
dog is the worst too, because he's looking at you like, why aren't you getting off the couch?
Literally,
Yeah.
literally just sitting and just look like, when are you taking me for a walk? Like, I'm like, dude, I can't freaking move.
Yeah. Oh, that sucks, man. I did that to my neck once in college and I like couldn't move for a good 5 days. And then
Yeah,
even the 2 weeks after, like I remember driving to school, I'm like, I can't check my blind spot because I can't like look over to the side.
yeah. The last time it's happened to me, I've had this injury before, so like I know I know I can get through it, but like, wow, last time I had it in college, it was in college and I had to like wear a back brace and like all this stuff just to feel okay.
Yeah.
Like going out in a suit and I have a back brace on underneath.
Oh, that sucks, man. Tough to concentrate. Tough to sit at your desk and get anything done when your back's hurting.
Yeah, and I mean, I literally couldn't sit, so I was on, throughout the week, I was like, okay, I have to get on some calls and things. I can't just like not be around. So I'd be laying on the couch, like completely prone, and my laptop would just be like on my chest. And be like, hey guys, so la la la.
Oh man, that sucks.
Gotta do what you gotta do though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Cool. So, how's Stammer? What's going on?
It's good. I mean, everything's like pretty steady right now. Still dealing with churn. We did see a very interesting thread from another company, Jenny AI. I think they're at like 10 million ARR or something. Um, but the main guy, I believe his name is David Park, was tweeted out a success tweet the other day saying that we just broke 10% churn rate as a success. And if you
Interesting.
look, the graph that he shared, they were at 20% churn rate, which is even higher than what we were at.
Mhm.
Now, different target market, different customer base, different product, and like entirely, but it's still an AI product, which is one of the only reasons why I'm like, I even thought it was interesting. Just the fact that, oh, another AI company is dealing with high churn.
I kind of
And it's,
appreciate the transparency though. Like saying you broke 10% is a success metric. I think some of the large companies like Shopify have sort of demystified the fact that you can actually have a successful business but also have high structural churn because that's basically what it is for you. It's not that the product doesn't work, it's that the customer doesn't know how to make it work.
yeah, yeah. And it's a tough sell when the person isn't buying the thing to use it. They're buying the thing to sell it to others. And if they can't sell it to others, then they're not going to use it.
Yeah. Just like Shopify, man. If the
Yeah,
customer can't sell their product on the platform, they're not going to keep paying for the platform.
exactly.
That's
So I
tough.
think we can like change our pricing and our features and all these things as much as possible or as much as we think, but it all comes down to like helping these agencies sell something that they can actually sell, legitimately sell.
Yeah, makes sense.
And I think the next couple months in terms of our updates and features that we'll be releasing have it, like, these things have potential to purchase it to use it rather than purchase it to sell it. So for example, like the master chat interface that we're coming out, there could be a customer who purchases it for their business and wants to white label it for their business, but they don't want to sell it. They just want to use it internally, but they want it to match all of their existing company branding. So that could be I think a legitimate use case for that feature where the selling piece doesn't even come into play at all.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, you're right. If you can use it as an internal resource for the company rather than just you have to resell this in order to make it functional, yeah, it opens up a whole new can of, well, like a whole new segment of customers.
Yeah,
makes sense.
Exactly. And then voice on top of that, I think we'll just continue that trend of offering things that will be easier for people to sell. And I think from all the feedback I've gotten from all the agencies, voice is the easiest thing to sell. So trying to race towards that as quickly as possible. And pretty much I built basically the entire thing in using Lovable, which is wild. I don't know if I showed you that last.
Yeah, you did.
Last meeting. Yeah. So I'm hoping that doing all of that pre-work will allow the team to quickly develop it within the platform. So that way we can like get it out very quickly.
Because you've basically shown them what it's going to look like and you've given them snippets of code, right? That's what Lovable is. It's like a text to code generator. And then you can send that to the dev team. Am I understanding it correctly?
Pretty much. So there's a trend going on right now with these like no code AI tools. Cursor, Lovable, Bolt, Windsurf. All these companies have gone from like 0 to like 10 million ARR like in negative time. It's crazy how fast these are growing. The users of these platforms are more, I would say, like code adjacent people, not necessarily programmers. Cursor is I think one of the outliers because you can use that as a traditional engineer. But there's this term going around, called vibe coding or vibe dev. And it's basically like you're using these no code tools to build something that you can develop into something that's real or workable or live. And Lovable is one of those platforms. So instead of it being the actual code, it's more about the UI, UX, how things are intertwined with each other from a usability point of view without the back end necessarily working fully. So I can like build what I want voice or how I want my customers to engage with voice in the way that I think it would be built and do it in a way where it's a full live working demo, basically.
So vibe coding is it's kind of like taking your ideation and then turning it into code, but not having that be the app. It's like sending it to your dev team so that they can build the final product, but you've makeshift pieced it together.
Exactly.
Yeah, gotcha.
And I can give them the code if that is something that would be useful. One of the things that I realized is so in every single one of these vibe coding platforms, the UI library that's being used is called ShadCN. It's used by Lovable, it's used by Claude, it's used by everyone. And it's because it's such a simple and customizable UI library, but it's slightly different than the UI library that we're using for our existing platform. So Lovable cannot recreate it in that same UI library. So if I was using ShadCN, then I could export the code and send them the code and they could use it. But I also I like how clean this looks, but I don't like that it looks like every other thing out there that is just plain, super
Yeah,
plain.
yeah, that's the thing with UI UX is that it's become standardized in a way, like people intuitively know where things are, but the downside is that if you use those regular standardized pieces, then your app looks like everything else. But so I was thinking about this because I was playing around when you sent me Lovable. I was playing around with it. I'm like, oh, this would be great for actually implementing new features in Bambi. But same thing as you end up figuring it out. And then, especially for a mobile app, I need to go through the whole UI UX again. And then the code is not usable because it exports in a language that is not for us,
Exactly.
Swift, or for you, React Native or React, I guess.
Yeah. And that's the missing piece, I think, right now for this vibe coding mentality is you could probably, if you're really, if you're really in it, you could probably hack your way to get something on the App Store or like get something deployed.
Yeah.
But it's probably not going to be the best. It's probably going to and I think that's a piece where that will be solved eventually. But right now, you need you need someone who knows what the fuck they're doing in order to complete that last piece.
Yeah, yeah. And see, one of two things is going to happen. Either these types of programs are going to dictate the coding language that people use, especially for newbies, or these tools are going to adapt the export that you can select. So it'd be like export in Swift, export in Kotlin, export in Flutter, export in React. You can sort of choose the language. I think that would be super cool.
Yeah. Cursor, I think I'm still learning more about Cursor because it's definitely the heavier platform that can do multiple like file changes and things and can use other libraries without any problem. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of waiting for something in between Lovable and Cursor, like something a little bit more than this, but still not as intensive as like editing code myself.
Right. Yeah. So it hasn't replaced the dev yet, but it's allowed you to sort of hack things together.
And it's funny because our devs are seeing we share a lot of these news in our off-topic channels in Slack, and some of the devs are like, "Oh my gosh, are we about to get replaced?" I'm like, "Not even close. Like, there's like no way." So the other quick thing I learned on Lovable recently is, I mean, this might be dumb, but so you can make multiple different pages for different things, and this helps simplify the code for these different pages so that way you can do more work within the existing infrastructure without having context limit issues.
You're going over my head a little bit on that one, but looks cool.
So like, for example, like I was working on something here and then it says like refactor custom actions tab.tsx. And then, so I click that and it says refactor into smaller components for better maintainability. The file is getting quite long. So if I'm building out a page and all of a sudden there's like 10,000 lines of code on this one page, if I try to load all 10,000 lines of that code into the prompt and then ask it a question or make a change, it'll say, oh, like we can't do that because it's over the context limit of the AI model itself. Like we just like it legitimately can't do anything about it. So this will split files into smaller pieces, which allows you to maintain functionality, but then you can still edit things as needed.
That's really cool. So it's kind of like the regular person equivalent of saying, I don't need you to track my entire ChatGPT history. It's just this one conversation that you have to reference.
Yes. And that is the big multi-million-dollar question when it comes to these AI vibe coding platforms is you can't just load your entire code base into every message. You have to take different chunks, but if you take different chunks, then it doesn't necessarily know how the rest of the code base is structured or works. So then if it changes this one chunk that then affects everything else in a negative way, then everything breaks.
So is this just a costing issue? Like, could I ask, if I were to be willing to pay like $10 per question, would that solve the problem? Because you could load all the data?
Maybe. Well, so there is a hard limit on the AI models themselves. I believe it's 120 something thousand like tokens for input. I believe is 128,000. I think is the input limit for the context window for some of these models. I mean, that's quite a bit of data, but at that point, I mean, you might be spending even more than $10 per message just on that cost per tokens. And I think this is one of the reasons why Lovable, their billing tracks per message. So like in their base plan, you get 100 messages per month for $20 a month.
Interesting.
And then if you go over that, it just stops working. Like you need to upgrade to get more messages. And I've upgraded twice already.
Have you? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I'll get into my whole piece of it later, but I'm learning just how expensive it is to actually run AI. This is like a whole other thing. I'll get into my piece after.
Well, I mean, good segue, because I have something on that as well that we were trying to figure out over the weekend, and it's all related to that stuff that we were talking about when I was telling you about the margin and how you need to calculate what your cost per message is, and if you get that wrong, well, I got it wrong.
Okay.
Oh boy, was it a fucking expensive mistake.
Okay.
couple $1,000s of extra OpenAI costs that we shouldn't have needed to pay for, essentially. So I'll try to keep this like relatively non-technical, because I spent probably 4 days on AI math. Like, how do you convert tokens to characters, or characters to tokens, to words, to cost per minute, the average input tokens versus output tokens, all the things.
Sure.
The way that we calculate our cost per minute, and this is actually like probably too revealing, but whatever. We calculate our cost per message by the average amount of input and output tokens across the entire platform. Right? That gives us our cost, and then we add a small margin on top to ensure that we can, pay for everything, essentially. What we found out is that so that average takes into account all the people that have zero usage, but also the people that have a lot of usage. Where things start to get skewed is when there's outliers. So if there's an outlier that has zero, that doesn't really affect our margin because it's zero. On the flip side, the super high usage, where they're beyond the average at extremely high usage amounts. So we found out that some of these high usage accounts were using an old model, GPT-4o Turbo, which is the most expensive model that OpenAI offers, and loading 10x the amount of data that we calculated as our averages as the input. So, for example, we charge our customers 5 cents per every GPT-4 Turbo message. When we calculated this out, our cost was like 12 cents a message, even though we were only charging our client 5 cents a message. And he was running 20 to 60,000 messages like a week. So I got a notification on February 12th saying like, oh, you hit a threshold limit in your OpenAI spend. I was like, whoa, hold on. Like, We don't usually hit that until the end of the month. And we hit this on the 12th. Like, what the, hold the phone. Like, something's wrong. Sure enough, we go into our, I think I can show you this. I'll cut this out. So this was our December bill, $1,100. January, it doubled.
Wow. Holy shit.
And we're like, oh, fuck. And then February, it was trending to like break our top end threshold. Like, we were going to be spending like even more money than this. So we figured it out, and then we caught it, and we made an update, and now our spend is back down to normal levels.
So what was I guess the problem is the user has a database of so much information that they're trying to render on every message, right?
Kind of. So the way that we calculated input is it's the user's query plus the prompt plus the knowledge base results plus up to 20 messages prior in the conversation as context. So there's like 4 things, and the user's query is negligible because it's usually pretty small. Like, how much is pricing? That's like 10 tokens. The prompt itself, for the people that we looked at, was not super long. Maybe 800 tokens, if that. So like, not that many. So it comes down to the knowledge base search results and the past conversation results. And so we realized that we need to put basically a limiter on these pieces in order to make sure that it doesn't go over a certain amount of input tokens that then causes all of the margins to break. And so we put in a limiter, and all of a sudden it went from $250 a day down to $13.
Back to normal.
Yeah.
Yikes.
On top of that, we also reached out individually to these customers and said, hey, you're using an old model that's costing you 5 cents a message. I would highly recommend that you update to the GPT-4o model, which will only cost you 1 cent per message, which is also still within our margin. So that was also a win-win for them, because they were just way overpaying. Like, there's no need to be paying that much.
They're overpaying, and they're inflating your costs much higher than what your margin is. If you're paying 12 cents, they're paying 5 cents, whereas now they pay 1 cent and you pay whatever, 0.8
Exactly.
cents.
It helps no one. Like, nobody's winning here.
Yeah. And see, that's why it's so complicated. That's crazy.
Incredibly complicated. Yeah. And to be honest, I only kind of caught this or figured this out because I've been doing so much work trying to figure out how to price out voice.
Yeah.
So that's my little thing on cost. What's your thing on cost? Where are you edging towards?
All right. My thing is like a whole rabbit hole, basically.
Okay.
All right. So here's what I realized in the mobile app world that is so not even close to B2B. It's not even funny. And this is my first experience doing mobile apps, or even like anything direct to consumer other than our e-com brand for a while. But even that, it feels like you're kind of just pulling levers on the back end. You're not really like at the forefront of talking to customers. So I learned that what we built, there's a lot of GPT wrappers, but a lot of them in the B2B space have real practicality. Like, I've seen AI models that help you interpret legal documents. Their new GPT-1 helps with like advanced reasoning, which is great. And like, a lot of people can build wrappers off of that. But to put it in a mobile app that is not native to the apps that you're already using makes it not as useful as I thought it was going to be. So in other words, if you can integrate an app into like Instagram or WhatsApp or SMS or like iMessage, then this is useful, because, or into dating apps is a good one. These are things where you need assistance responding. But if it doesn't have a social aspect to it where someone is not reading the message on the other side, then having a chat interface is virtually useless if you're just going to use it internally. unless you're reading some type of knowledge base. But to like gather new information and use it as a search engine, it's the equivalent of using ChatGPT in the user's mind. So on our app, on Bambi, we had this machine learning backend where every question and every memory item updates the information that it learns about the child. And it took us a while to figure out how to actually do that without just amounting this huge sum of information about the child, which is what we talked about. What's it called again? The
Vector?
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, took us a while to figure this out, but we figured it out. Well, now what we realized after figuring that out is that what makes a mobile app useful, and this is just my naiveness and lack of knowledge, is the functionality that's hard-coded into the app. So how to actually navigate through the app, the information that you're inputting into the app. The AI is really only used to help you interpret data that the user has input. It shouldn't be used to give new information, basically. So, for instance, honestly, I'm just going to share my screen. It's going to make way more sense. Figma's a beast. Takes forever. So, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, so here was the base level functionality. We had like two core features, which is your questions and your memory. Right? In the questions, you can ask a question and get a response. We have different profiles per child, or if you're pregnant, and then based on the child's age and gender, you're going to get different topics and different preloaded questions that are applicable to that child. So a 5-year-old boy is going to get different questions than a mother who's pregnant, right? And different responses. Anytime you add something into the memory, the chat adjusts based on what you added. Anytime you ask a question, it will load that information into the memory for the child. So from a practical standpoint, it made a lot of sense. And from a user standpoint, they didn't realize how useful it was until they started to use it a lot. But that's not the way that apps work. You need to have the aha moment immediately and experience the relief of the problem that you're experiencing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So enter version 2, because this is just a chatbot as far as the user is concerned. There is no added functionality. Even though there isn't for the user. Okay, so enter version number 2 with a whole other layer of complexity. And what I realized is that if you can hard code the things into the app that you want the user to do, not only are you going to get more data and make the AI even more useful, but you're going to make the app more practical from a daily standpoint. So rather than just using this as your personal search engine for your child, we've added practical features that in turn will contribute to the information that we can build around the child's profile and then improve the chat that we get using our chatbot. So we added this sleep tracker, which is a big problem if you have kids. Nap time is a pain in the ass, especially if they're from 0 to 12 months. So we have this little start-stop timer that will determine the average sleep time that the child has compared to what their previous night was, or their trailing 7-day average, what their average nap time is compared to their most recent nap, and then it will predict how long the child should stay awake for based on their age, what their ideal bedtime is going to be, and what their ideal nap time is going to be depending on how many naps they're going to take that day, which is dictated by the time that the child woke up. So we have all of these features that are AI driven, but this is the piece that's hard coded, right? It's not as if the user knows that this is AI generated, but it's the fact that the data that they input, the usefulness of a start-stop timer for sleep will give the output of figuring out the ideal bedtime, what their wake window is, and what their nap time is going to be.
And they don't have to query it to ask that.
Bingo. Exactly.
Got it.
So even though the feature already exists in the app, the start-stop timer didn't exist, so that actually is new. But even though a lot of the features already exist in AI, if it's not hard-coded into the platform and you make it extremely obvious what the user can do, then they're not going to do it. Right? It's the perfect example is like Cal AI. They are completely using ChatGPT, but they have this little spreadsheet in the back end that stores information about the food that you ate and what the macros were, right? You could just use ChatGPT. You could take a picture of your food and be like, what are the macros of this meal? And it will tell you. It's not going to give you a beautiful graph, and ChatGPT has a bunch of other functions. Right? So that's what we realized. We just need to be crystal clear on what the functionality is. So with the sleep timer, it's going to give you this data that is generated through machine learning to figure out what the nap time is in the bedtime for your child every day. All right, so it's something that you could do in the first version, but you're not going to because the buttons aren't there. Am I explaining that right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then
it makes sense.
And then then we have these whole things like track their sleep calendar. We have this milestone tracker where you can figure out if your child's height and weight is progressing at the same pace that other children of their age and gender should be progressing at. So you can figure out if their height is an easy one, if they're on track to be taller or shorter. Not like it matters, but parents are interested in knowing this information. Or the weight thing, are they on track to be heavier or lighter? This is going to be particularly important when children are above the age of 1 and they start eating solid food. That might be important to track. If they're eating pretty unhealthy food, you might want to keep an eye on them. Or there's something like a milestone tracking feature, which is, if your kid starts walking at 11 months, then they're going to be within an earlier percentile than if they start walking at 18 months. So all of this information is just going to help you track the child's development over time. And the reason we added this feature in, and the reason we add the sleep tracking in, and the reason why we're working on a consumption tracker as well, the foods they like and they don't like, the ability to scan a food label, create a meal plan for the child. Although the functionality is already in the app, unless we show the user exactly what to click on and give them options on what to do, then the AI is not going to be useful. And then by giving them the options on creating a meal plan, logging the foods that they like or dislike, it will actually improve the responses that the chat gives in the first place. So I have come to realize that AI, at least in mobile apps, is just an interpreter of data. It's not the feature itself. I guess I kind of learned that one the hard way. Anyway, does this make sense to you, or did I miss the point here?
Is the memory is essentially like the knowledge base of each child?
Yeah, exactly.
Are you loading the knowledge base in every query without any vector or semantic search?
Yes, but it's because the knowledge base is going to be really small now, and it's only relative to the most recent update or upload. So for instance, like adding height and weight data, you're going to add it say a maximum of 12 times over 2 years, which is just a couple numbers.
Yeah.
So this is not a lot of data to store. The food is just a selection of preference. The nap and sleep time, we only have to recollect the previous 7 days worth of data. The other data can be stored, but doesn't have to be recollected by the AI. So basically, no, we're not going to vector the data.
Okay. I just keep an eye on that in terms of what your... So one of the things I wish I was tracking from the very beginning is total tokens used per account versus average.
Okay.
And we're investigating this right now, but we believe that you can do this where you can track API usage per user accounts in the dashboard. We're still trying to figure out how to do that, but that would be, I think, something useful just for your peace of mind, maybe even just knowing that you're not spending a lot of money.
Yeah.
Or on the flip side, for the same reason that I caught the notification, setting up those notifications that way you know that you're spending a certain amount of money. Yeah. Just it's these safeguards to not screw over your future self.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's good to know. It's good that you've been through it, and I can, let you make the mistakes before I do.
Yeah. Yeah. So are those new features from feedback that you got from customers?
It's partially from feedback and it's partially from the most popular features used on the most popular apps. So it's the overwhelming feedback is that you don't know that the chat is different than ChatGPT until you use it a bunch, which is true. It's good feedback. And that the pain points that are most important to solve is sleep tracking, nutrition tracking, and milestone tracking. And I think the reason tracking is so important for kids in general is because you can't ask them questions. Like, you don't really know what's happening. But if they have been awake for a certain amount of time and they haven't slept, or if they, I don't know, haven't eaten in a certain amount of time, or maybe they didn't hit like the calorie intake that they're supposed to, like all of these things just affect the way that the child's going to behave. And you don't always know. So that's why I think data is so important here.
Is it account based where like you and Kathy can both make updates on a kid and it updates on both of your phones?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, so there are different profiles per kid, and then you can add your partner or your caregiver. We also spoke, this is kind of interesting, we spoke with a teacher, an elementary school teacher, who mentioned that this would be really useful for her to use as a teacher for all of the kids in her class, where the parents could update information, particularly related to learning preferences or learning disabilities, allergies, just little like ticks that make kids unique that teachers don't always have access to. But if you could almost have a repository of information for each child, then that would be extremely useful.
That's when you get into some contracts.
Yeah, some corporate deals for sure.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
That's
I thought that was really
feedback.
interesting. I didn't even think about that application until she mentioned it.
There's probably so many of those use cases or like they're probably so obvious that are like they're hitting us in the face and we're just like, cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Let me build the phones, like AI phones. Like,
yeah, it's a whole different world though. It's crazy. It makes sense why it's so much harder, because the fulfillment is not. I always compare it to agency stuff, but like, agency is just a through line business. It's so easy to understand. You sell the service, you do the service. Versus this is like, you build the thing. There's no guarantee or even inclination if you're on the right track until you launch it or talk to users or get feedback in some sort of way.
mm-hmm.
And you have to put in a lot of work to do it in order to figure out that you're wrong. So yeah, it's been a challenge, to say the least.
Still feel like it was the right move or progression in your like career? Too early still, maybe?
It's a complicated question because we made good money from the sale. So that can't be ignored. And I think that whether it was the right decision or not, if I were to go back with the information I had at the time, I still would have decided to sell the agency anyways. So yeah, honestly, if I didn't sell, I think I would have been so burnt out at this point that I probably would have just closed it down.
We got to remember all the conversations of, oh, I fucking hate this, I want to quit. Like,
it's hard, man. It's its own kind of hard. Like, it's a simple business to understand, but it's very hard to scale. You're basically in the business of like emotional mediation for clients and hiring team members and keeping them motivated to do work.
And it's less about your business and more about other people's businesses.
Well, yeah, exactly. Your entire business is building other people's businesses, which is a mind fuck on its own. But in terms of the cash flow, like, you can't beat it. You can't beat the fucking cash flow of an agency. It's crazy. I spoke to Sam today. His developer went through my Figma for Bambi and like gave me a whole bunch of feedback and advice. And then he showed me his software. It's so fucking cool. It's so useful. Oh my God. But
Is that the one that automates Klaviyo or something?
yeah, it's like it's an email marketing automation tool. He talked to me a lot about hard coding things into the app. He's like, look, if we just told AI to build the email, it would never make sense. The flow wouldn't make sense. He's like, we have worked with so many brands. We know exactly what makes a good email. We know that you need a large text up front. You need a subtext. You need a made image. You need a few product images. And this is the placement of the text. So here are a few possible layouts that an email could show. And that's the piece that's hard coded in. But the piece that uses AI is fitting it into this little box. Like, we need this image here. We need the color of this box to be related to the color on the image, the primary color on the image. So it's like all these little things. If you just told AI to do the whole thing, it would give you a shitty output. That's what I've learned.
I've learned that firsthand as well, especially using these vibe coding platforms where you just tell it like, oh, build me this interface. And then it's like, whoa, like,
yeah, if you even just, you showed me the, like the OpenAI, whatever info, like their knowledge base. And if you read it, one of the first things they say is AI can't read your mind. You have to tell it exactly what you want. And the more information you give it about specific instructions, the better the output is going to be. So, but anyway, sorry, going back to my point, Sam is still running his agency while he's building Magicals, which is great because it's really expensive to build. He's been doing it for over a year, and he's using the revenue from the agency to bankroll his developer costs that are employees at the agency, which makes a lot of sense. Like, he has his agency running on the side. I think he has 5 people, and then he has a full-time dev that's building Magicals that is just employed by the parent company, which is the agency.
mm-hmm.
And his revenue is fucking amazing. I probably can't share what it is because he's told to me in confidence, but it's really good.
Yeah. Well, I remember from when, I'm sure it's more than what he told me last time we talked. So.
Oh, it's
yeah.
more.
Yeah.
It's more.
Well, that's good. Good for him. And that, I mean, that's definitely the way to do this is not, I see so many people being like, oh, I just quit my 9 to 5 and I'm starting to build my new thing.
Yeah.
Like, that's tough. That's a rough, and I get the gung-ho-ness and wanting to like dive in, and I think there's such an emotional side to these plays that people do. I mean, even to yours of just like, oh, I don't want to do this agency thing anymore.
I think that quitting your 9 to 5 it depends on the level of complexity of the thing that you're starting. And how long it's going to take on average to make money from it. Like, if you're basically doing anything other than selling a service or a course, I probably wouldn't abandon your income. Like, even something like e-com that can and should be profitable immediately takes time. Like, you got to season the ad account. You need to spend some money on creators to get some good UGC, or spend a lot of time building the UGC yourself. And maybe the product's not great, or the shipping cost is bad, or like the margin is not what you thought it was going to be. Or in the case of software, I mean, fucking, you better have some money. But yeah, I mean, quitting your 9 to 5, start an agency, fucking go for it, man. Good luck. In a good way. You can probably do it. He can probably do it. You can start on Upwork. You can find clients. The margin's baked in because you know what your hourly cost is to employ people versus what you're charging the client. Like, you can do that. But if you want to actually build something hard, this goes back to what we talked about last time. Like, there are just different levels of difficulty in every business. And software has a significantly higher level of difficulty than running a service-based business does.
Definitely.
But higher exit. So,
higher exit, more fulfilling. I was telling a friend the other day, like, the business now is running and, sustainable without me being in the day-to-day.
Yeah.
So now my job is people just come to me with problems to solve. And I find, and she was like, oh, do you like that? And I was like, actually, yeah, because it's all related to the thing I'm obsessed with, which is the business, but it's unique things to solve in creative ways that potentially make me more money or save me money. And I view kind of everything as like a game where the results are money.
Well, that's what business is, just pulling levers, basically. It's like changing little things, solving difficult problems, and seeing how it affects your bottom line.
And from my, like, in my position now, it's like, on, you know, and if I wake up on a daily basis, it's like, oh, am I solving a product problem or a marketing problem or a sales problem or a support problem, or like what aspect? And I think I'm not overwhelmed by that because I've had individual experience in each of these places, like before having to manage them all, I guess. And that goes back to what we were talking about in one of the past episodes, where like starting a software business as your first business is incredibly difficult versus starting with something easier like an agency or econ, like buying and selling. There's a lot of people that are obsessed with like the Pokemon craze right now, and like buying and selling Pokemon cards and Pokemon packs and things. And it reminds me of like the early hustle when I was, you know, when I was a lot younger, where it encourages the mind, like, oh, I can make money by doing this thing, not having to work for somebody. Like I can just make money. And I think that is like the precursor to being an entrepreneur or setting yourself up for the next thing, where you realize, oh, I just spent all day buying and selling Pokemon packs and only made like a couple $100, versus I could do this for other reasons and other ways for myself, but make 10x the amount of money. And I've tried to parlay that to some of my friends who are doing this, where I'm like, I love the hustle that you're doing, but try to, you know, let's try to roll that into the next bigger and badder thing, where you're not buying and selling things for $10, you're buying and selling things for $100,000.
Yeah. Yep. For sure. For sure. I mean, that's like the first mind-opening moment, is you can make money on your own. And
you can just do things.
Yeah.
Love that quote.
You could just think in terms of a consumer. What are the things that you spend money on? Well, other people spend money on those things too. Like it really is as simple as that.
Yeah. Yeah. Another kind of like side thing I was thinking about is how originally when I created Stammer, like the first version of it, I was making content and videos about all these new AI tools, and then released an AI tool. And I was thinking of like, okay, what are these other like avenues or things or niches that I'm in? And I was thinking, even though I use other platforms for this already, making a ManyChat competitor, I think, would be a good idea.
Yeah, I think so. I totally agree with you. What would you just directly compete with them, or would you make it inherently better in any way?
I would expect that I would eventually find ways to make it better. I mean, the immediate sell to me, or that I would do, is it's not scalable cost. It's a flat rate comparatively to where ManyChat charges you per account that you message. And my ManyChat bill was, you know, $300, $400 at one point before I canceled it and moved everything over to GHL, which is now just free. But I would have easily paid like 50, 60, maybe even $100 a month just to like manage all, like, no matter how many people come in, just like all of them. So I don't know. There's other ideas.
Yeah, there's always an opportunity for a better mousetrap. I think that's what I'm realizing with the mobile app, is that there are a few companies that fucking dominate the space. They completely dominate like nutrition tracking, sleep tracking, meal plan prep, pregnancy tracking. But honestly, that one's super difficult. But there's a couple companies that absolutely dominate the space, but I don't think they do a great job at UX, and they definitely don't do a great job with marketing. So I'm like, fuck, that's the opportunity. You take the most valuable pieces of each of these apps and put it into a master app. Hey.
There's a quote that what you just said brings up a quote in my mind that I saw the other day about how you are, as you go down the rabbit hole of building, you eventually get to a point where you are building for the edge cases and not for what you originally built. I realize most software founders spend 90% of their time building what 10% of their users want, obsessing over edge cases and power features while ignoring what people brought to their product in the first place. They get seduced by the loudest voices in the Discord, building increasingly complex features for a tiny subset of users, while their core experience stays mediocre. Meanwhile, the silent majority, who love the original thing, slowly drift away as the thing that they fell in love with becomes bloated and complicated for no reason.
That's pretty well put.
Pretty well put, and something to think about, for sure.
Yep. Yeah, I'm still really in the early... I recognize that I'm really early in the journey and trying to figure out this entire world. And it's... what we're doing now is not what I thought we were going to be doing originally when we first had the idea.
I think if it was, that would be a problem.
It's a little.
So I think the fact that you are pivoting slightly, or I wouldn't say pivoting, I would say adjusting. You're adjusting your strategy to be better. Like that's I think what all the best companies do.
Yeah.
Versus just giving up. Like quitting. Yeah. I was talking to Tim about this the other day, like, and I think you probably have this with Kathy, I'm assuming, but like having a partner that can pull you up on your down days or vice versa, comparatively to the solo single founder, where you're just in this all by yourself and you're like, oh, this isn't working, I'm just going to give up or try something. Like, I think so many people give up because they don't have a good partner to encourage them to keep going.
Yeah, that's definitely true. That's definitely true. But it is a shift going from celebrating to problem solving.
Celebrating what?
How much money we were making.
Oh, yeah.
Duh.
Fair.
But you know what? It's different. Like I can bitch. I used to bitch about client work because it's, frustrating and tedious and whatever. Service-based, you know how it is. But when I can celebrate, like, guess how much we made today? Or like show her the Stripe account and be like, look, we made fucking 24 grand today. Ha ha ha, this is so cool. Makes it worth it. Versus now it's like solving complex problems that still may or may not work out. And then selling $30 a year subscriptions. It's just a different business. It's just a hard fucking business.
Yeah. Are you going to force this to work, or have you put in like some sort of milestones where you're like, okay, it's not going to work and we need to do something else?
It's just deciding when to turn off the tap. That's all. Or trying to think about how to answer. I'm just going to like ramble. I don't know. We can cut this part out maybe, but like, it's just, it's like we got a big check from selling the agency. We got a bunch of money and we don't really have any expenses because we bought the house in cash and I don't have any debt. So like everything is fine, but there's a second kid on the way and there's only a certain amount of time until, you spend, how many years can go by where you just like spend 100 grand, spend 100 grand, spend 100 grand on development and shit, while at the same time you're spending for your life. Mm-hmm. And you just ask like, what is the point where you either turn off the tap or you go back to doing the thing that you know how to do to make money, to fuel this, or is it not going to work at all? And you don't go back to selling services and you don't pursue building this app and you do something entirely different. But then different could be its own set of problems that you can't foresee right now. So honestly, between you and me, I don't know what the fuck to do. Honestly.
Is that why you're looking at Upwork?
Yeah. Because it's not like I'm running out of money anytime soon. Like, we've got tons of cash, but I just don't want to burn through it all. And I don't want to burn through it all on a pipe dream that, like, it might work. Because it might not.
Yeah.
And I'm also just, you know me, I'm super risk averse. Like, I don't like a week going by where the net worth has declined, let alone now coming up on 2 months.
Yeah.
Which I know is normal for most people. And it's like, fine, whatever, you invest in software, but it's just not so uncomfortable for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I'm being at Upwork. I'm like, should I just, I don't know, try to pull in like minimally 10K a month and let it fuel the investment into Bambi and just whatever, pay for some like ramen level profitability, ramen level expenses. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, running like you said with Sam, like running the agency while building.
Yeah. I would say that's the only mistake that I made, but I tried. That's the thing. I tried to run the agency and do other things, and I didn't dedicate the time or mental bandwidth to do the other thing because the agency is always pulling you. There's always like client work that pulls you back in. So,
well, and when you were, I think, maybe thinking about starting to build something, then you went through the whole process of selling, which was a whole nother mental
yeah, that was
state.
hard on its own. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe you could approach the Upwork agency side with more restrictions or things in place to like protect yourself in order to not have those feelings that are negative towards the agency work.
Yeah, I don't have any negativity towards running the agency. I realized by selling, I've now spoken to so many other agency owners that are like, dude, you sold. I'm thinking about doing it, but I'm going to miss the cash flow. But how do I do it? And I wish I realized this sooner. I think I've said this on YouTube, is that whether you sell or you don't sell, the first step is to remove yourself, to get someone to be client-facing, do all the calls for you. Your fulfillment is probably going to be automated at this point. If you've like made it this far to consider selling, it's not going to be just you. Otherwise, you have nothing to sell. But you need to remove yourself from the client. So
I think that's one of the big signs of the business works as a business, not as the key man clause, so to speak, where if you like, you know, breaking my back and not being online for a week, like the business still grew.
mm-hmm.
Like calls are still being taken by the team. Like I think that's been probably the biggest revelation for myself and my business in the last year. I've never had that. I've always had to do the work myself. But now that there's people in order, you know, I put the people in place and pay them to do that work.
Yeah, see, that was the missing piece that I had in the agency. I had all the fulfillment in place, locked in. I was just the mediator between the client, onboarding items into Notion or Trello or ClickUp or whatever you're using, your project management, the team executing on it, and then me communicating it back to the client. If I just fill this gap of client communication on the front end to interpret the tasks, log it into your task management system, and then the back end of communicating the performance of the changes that were made. If I just filled those gaps, I wouldn't be needed in the company. And then the other gap is client acquisition, which is a harder thing to replace.
But that's where you should be spending the time, is on the hardest thing.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. So that's sort of the thing the mistake I made is I went through the typical like newbie agency owner cycle of I work really hard to get a bunch of clients, spend all the time servicing the clients, lose a couple clients, go back to spending time getting clients. And it's just like this ebb and flow. And that's why I think it took us so fucking long to get to like 40 to 50K a month because I didn't understand that I could remove myself from the client facing side, which I should have done. Yeah. And we didn't increase prices the way we should have. So that's why I think about doing the agency stuff again, because I'm like, it was really good cash flow and it wasn't that hard once I filled people into the right position of fulfillment and communication. So that's why I go back to it and I'm like, man, if I had that running and if I spent 4 months like setting it up and making sure it's really smooth and it's going really well, and then I can bankroll the software development side. It's sort of what I'm thinking about now.
Yeah. I had that with SiteRight for maybe a couple months where we were doing, like basically the same thing, ramen profitable, 10, 15 a month, and using that to then bootstrap the initial round of development. And then the biggest, and whether or not it was directly related, I think, from your stories or your feedback from removing yourself, getting the people in place, the right people in the right position for me to be able to do that. I mean, it's a complete game changer. And it took 3 people for me to do that. Like one for customer support, one for the head of the dev team, and another for sales or customer support.
Yeah. It would be the same thing for me. I have one on creative, one on technical, and then one on communication. Really 2 on creative, but the girl I had, Lucy, was so fucking good. She did the job of 2 people for sure.
Have you seen icon.me? I think it is. Yeah. So this is a new AI ad making tool that can do like ad flips. So you give it, a couple of different resources or videos or stock footage, and then it takes all that and whips it into 100 different videos with different intro hooks, different styles of captions. It's like at scale ad testing.
That's pretty cool. I want to look at that. That's the other reason why I think about starting an agency. And now I'm like, man, there's so many good tools that could help you automate the fulfillment. Like what you could, I'm just thinking about what we would charge for something like this. Like this, if you delivered this to a client, it would not be cheap. Anyway. All right. I have to go be a parent.
Get back to the main job.
Yeah, exactly. Did you bid on a bunch of jobs on Upwork?
I used to.
Yeah. What kind of money did you make there? Like monthly? Was the work hard? Did you like it?
Didn't like it because I was only doing it for the money. Because I would only do the Upwork stuff when I needed like instant cash.
Yeah.
So I would go there and like bid for like a website job or something, and then because my profile had like really good reviews, it had money that I've already made, and it had a video of me introducing myself, I would usually get people would respond to that pretty well.
Yeah.
But it's a whole thing in and of itself, like spending a couple hours like applying to jobs, just like scrolling through Upwork. Like I don't want to be doing that.
Yeah. All right.
So like if you need the cash, I think it's good, but otherwise.
That's my fucking problem. I'm like doing these things. I'm like, I need the money. What am I even fucking doing this for? And I'm doing this to not go down, not to pay rent.
And that's where I was like, oh, I need to literally get $1,000 to pay rent.
Yeah.
So I need to do this no matter what.
All right. I gotta jump.
All right. Keep me posted.
Okay. Talk to you later. Thanks, man.
Talk to you. See ya.